Good morning, brothers and guests. Now we're going to begin our program with the Black Health Matters presentation. And in that process, I'd like to call up Dr. Pruitt, the district medical chair, and Dr. Mon Hervey to come up, and they can introduce our speakers.
Greetings and good morning, everybody. Morning. As he said, I'm the 7th District Medical Health and Initiative Chair, which includes, and I'm giving this information for our guests, I know the brothers know, but that includes Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and Florida. And we have a very important program for you today called Caring for the Heart of Our Community, which is hosted by Black Health Matters and Boston Scientific. Thank you. As you know, or you may not know, cardiovascular disease and events is the #1 killer of African Americans. So Black Health Matters and Boston Scientific will be bringing you some very important information and valuable information on heart health and cardiovascular today. Please hold all questions to the end of the program so that we may proceed as our program allows us. And I'm going to bring up our corporate relations person, Brother Hervey, and he has a few words and an introduction. Thank you.
Good morning, brothers and guests. I can tell you as the chair of the Corporate Sponsorships Committee that what you see today represents an awesome partnership. Black Health Matters, powered by Boston Scientific advancing science through life and helping human beings to live longer and better lives. Out of all of the things that they do worldwide, they recognize that Black health matters. And the organization, Black Health Matters, is led by Rosalind Daniels. And Rosalind Daniels, out of all of the things that Black Health Matters as an organization does around the country, realized that Black health matters particularly for men. For the states that are represented in this room, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, and Georgia, Black health matters most. The data suggests that Black health matters most. Today we have Ms. Rosalind Daniels, who is a tireless advocate, and I'm going to emphasize the word tireless because her entire team have worked tirelessly and diligently to ensure that we get the information that we need to live longer and better lives. Rosalind is the former senior executive in broadcast and publishing. She is a nationally respected health strategist with more than 20 years designing and implementing cross-cultural health education programs and initiatives. Ms. Daniels is disrupting the educational space for African American patients. In 2018, she launched the Black Health Matters Summit, a multi-platform initiative that features live TED Talk-inspired presentations by leading clinicians and health advocates. Brothers and guests, I present Ms. Rosalind Daniels, the President and CEO of Black Health Matters.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. How was it last night? Did you all go to the pool? No pool? Okay. So everyone had a great time? Good, good. I'm so pleased to be here. Again, as you know, we just talked about how Black health is so incredibly important. But I just want you all to understand that for the most part, Black men are not a part of the health conversations that are taking place in this country. Black men tend to be medically underserved. You all aren't getting the care, you're not getting the respect from the physicians. There are certain issues, such as social determinants of health, that make it very difficult to have playgrounds and places to walk, places where you can get fresh produce, all of that. And we need you all. And I always joke, I have a story. I was single up until a few months ago. And when I was looking to date, the brothers who were like my age were kind of broken down. So I was like, well, I want to party, I want to go places, I want to do things. Why don't they have any pep in their step? So I had to look at the numbers, I had to look at the research, and I understood why. And then it was just a natural step to move forward and to preach and evangelize why you all have to be knowledgeable, proactive. You've got families that need you. We need you. You are leaders. And so we're doing our program here. We thank all of the gentlemen that helped make this happen today. And we know that it's going to be a ripple effect, not just today, not just in Charlotte, but moving forward. Now, I have energy, but you have yet to meet Camille Chang Gilmore. And she is the reason why we are all here. She sees the vision, and she's investing in the vision. And she's brought her magnificent team. Can I ask you all to stand up? Boston Scientific, close the gap. So she comes with people with power and influence and compassion. Camille Chang Gilmore leads the development and execution of Boston Scientific's global inclusion, engagement, and diversity strategy initiatives. She is a member of the global HR leadership team and has more than 25 years of HR leadership experience. In January, her global diversity officer responsibilities expanded to include driving D&I strategies across Close the Gap, supplier diversity, and U.S. diversity recruiting, as well as overseeing the company's community engagement efforts, of which this is a part. And now I take great pleasure in introducing you to Camille Chang Gilmore. Thanks so much, Rosalind.
Thank you so much, Rosalind. Greetings, good morning. I want to say greetings to the Grand Bossless, Dr. David Marion. I believe his birthday happened earlier this week. Members of the Supreme Council, the 7th District, Regional Harris, Dr. Kevin Pruitt, who oversees our health initiatives, all the brothers of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated, and the QETs. Welcome to the session, Caring for the Heart of Our Community. I am Camille Chang Gilmore, and I'm honored to be the Vice President of Human Resources and Global Chief Diversity Officer for Boston Scientific. And yes, I am a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, married 28 years to an Omega man extraordinaire, Derek Gilmore, new chapter, spring '89, number 5. I am here today with an amazing team from Close the Gap, and Rosalind allowed them to stand, and I want them to stand one more time because we do nothing without them. And we are focused on healthcare disparities and eradicating that issue. I'll tell you a quick story that I told at dinner. This is not a hobby for me. This is passion and dedication. My brother, my youngest brother, died at age 38. Type 2 diabetes, would wrap his feet because they bled and did not want to tell anyone. He had a stroke and then subsequently a heart attack. And I told the folks at his funeral, do you know what we do? Do you know what I do? We save lives, but I couldn't save my brother's life. So I'm here to save another brother's life if I can. We are here with such a distinguished panel, an amazing panel of physicians who I'd like to introduce and have them introduce themselves to you. First, I want to introduce Dr. Alamade Alabi from the Emory University Hospital and Atlanta VA Medical Center. Dr. Alabi.
Hi, everyone. My name is Olamide Alabi. I'm a vascular surgeon. I'm not a cardiologist, but I'm a vascular surgeon at Emory University Hospital. I also spend a couple days a week at the Atlanta VA. My clinical as well as research passion are limb salvage. We all know that Black Lives Matter. We're learning today more about that Black health matters, but I also want to admonish you all to understand that Black limbs matter also.
That's right. That's right. Thank you, Dr. Alabi. Next up, we have Dr. Bukula Olabi from Piedmont Heart Hospital.
Hello, everyone. My name is Bukola Lubi. I'm a general cardiologist with Piedmont Heart Institute. I'm originally from Nigeria. I've been here about 30 years. I'm married to a wonderful man for the last 30 years. And I have 3 teenagers. I'm also a mom to 2 German Shepherds.
Can't forget about those pets. They're so important. Next up, we have Dr. Marcus L. Brown from Northside Hospital.
Good morning, gentlemen. My name is Marcus Brown. I'm an interventional cardiologist at Northside Hospital. Born and raised here in the fine state of Georgia. I am a member of Kappa Alpha Psi Incorporated. But I will tell you that I take care of the purple and gold as well. I don't discriminate, and neither does heart disease.
That's right.
So we have to keep that in mind. So I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy you guys had this forum.
Oh, thank you, Doctor. Dr. Brown, I think the Crimson Tide gave it away, and the socks. And next up, we have Dr. David Casey from Piedmont Eastside.
Hello, gentlemen. How you guys doing today? So I'm from a little town called Opelousas, Louisiana, in Opelousas, Italy. Anybody from Southern University? Any graduates from Southern University? So I play as the Beta Sig chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha. If you guys don't know, both Omegas and the Alphas both are Beta Sig chapters. So yeah. But I appreciate you guys having me here today. It's great to be here. And once again, as Dr. Brown, I'm an interventional cardiologist, which means I went to college for 4 years, medical school for 4 years, research for 3 years, fellowship and residency for 7 years, just to be a plumber. That's basically it. All right. So once again, I'm happy to be here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Casey. It's always great to have the firsts in the building. That's good. And you know what? I think we have to break because, from my understanding, we have the Grand Basilisk, Dr. David Marion, here with us. Okay. Well, when he comes back from the water break, we'll be able to introduce him. But let's keep this moving. You know, one of the things that we wanted to do is to jump in the conversation, but I think it's going to be important to just reinforce and ground us on why we're here today. So what I'd like to do is show a 2-minute Close the Gap video. If we could roll.
to address the gaps in our healthcare system, to provide something better, to find more chances to save more lives. It won't be easy, but we can help make it right. Because no one should be missed.
No one should be missed. And I know many of you know that COVID-19 had a dramatic impact on the Black community. The pandemic is not over, particularly for our Black community. We're dying of ignorance. So one of the things we're going to do today is achieve 3 goals. First, give you tangible information, action steps, and inspiration, empowerment to advocate for your own health. Number 2, we're going to engage in an authentic conversation to address some real health issues with our distinguished panel. And then, third, you all are going to leave here fresh with insight and inspiration to take charge of your health and, more importantly, take action. So the first step of action is I want you to take out your phones, if you can, gentlemen and guests. And I want you to put your phone up to the screen and scan this QR code and take this quick survey. Are you interested or concerned about heart health for yourself, your family, or your community? And the second one is, are you interested or concerned about vascular health for yourself, your family, and your community? Go ahead and do that survey real quick. And we're going to now jump into some of the questions. All right, you ready, panelists? Yes. Okay, well, now we're going to take that break before we go to the panelists. That's okay.
My brothers and guests, if you can join me in our usual customary fashion and bring forth our 41st Grand Basileus, Brother Dr. David Marion. That's fine. Thank you. We can proceed.
Thank you. And we are now going to jump into some amazing questions and some thought-provoking answers. So I'm going to start with Dr. Alabi. What is the one thing that people in the audience can do to advocate for their heart and vascular health, as well as the health of their families and communities? And you can use the mics.
So I think it's really hard to say one thing. And I think that if you would ask a lot of clinicians what's one of the major things that people can do, or we as clinicians can do, we would usually say education, right? We come to forums like this, we have health fairs, we do all these sorts of things in the community, and we educate people. But you can't really be educated unless you're aware, right? So I think it really starts with awareness, and I think that's how you can best advocate for yourself and for your family members. As sitting next to a lot of cardiologists, sitting next to people who deal with atherosclerotic or plaque buildup in the heart, I deal with plaque buildup in the legs and other arteries within the body. People know, everyone here kind of knows the cardinal signs of a heart attack, right? Most people know what are the signs of a stroke. Those are very well publicized things that you see on ads, that you see on television, things like that. But very few people know that that limb problems or amputation are even a problem worldwide, nationally, or here among our own community in terms of Black and brown individuals. So just to let you know, Black and brown communities have at least 2 to 5 times the rate of amputation compared to non-Black and brown communities. I'm sure most people don't know that. So this is a public health crisis. That's what I would say. And a public health crisis really requires a population health strategy to fix it. And it really starts with awareness.
Excellent. Dr. Ulabi?
So as you've heard, heart disease is the #1 killer. Actually, one person is dying of heart disease, there's a person dying of heart disease every 80 seconds. But heart disease is preventable. And so you can prevent heart disease before you require major treatment. And it's important in terms of prevention to get screened. You know, a lot of people think about screening, they think about getting screened for prostate cancer or things like that, but nobody ever really thinks about getting screened for your risk factors for heart disease. So what exactly are risk factors? These are conditions or habits that makes a person more likely to get a disease. And you'd find that risk factors are more prevalent in our everyday life than we think about. But most of them are hidden. We don't even realize that we have risk factors. For example, in this room, do you know that 90% of us have at least one or more risk factors for heart disease? And these risk factors, I said, that they're hidden. So, for example, high blood pressure, high cholesterol. Many people may not even realize that they have high blood pressure or high cholesterol unless they get screened. So it's very important that you advocate for yourselves and make sure that you see your providers to get screened for these risk factors. The American Heart Association has a program, a campaign called Know Your Numbers, which talks about knowing your numbers, talking to your doctor, asking your doctor, what is my blood pressure? What is my cholesterol? What's my blood sugar? It's important to know these numbers, because once you know these numbers, then you can take those necessary steps that's going to help reduce your risk for heart disease. And once you know your numbers, you also want to share that experience with your loved ones and your friends and families. You know, encourage them to get screened, encourage them to know their numbers, and encourage them to be advocating for their own health as well, and asking, what are my risk factors? What can I do about it? And how can I make a change? If you don't know your risk factors, you can't make a change. I'll give you an example. I had a patient who has family history of heart disease, and he realized that this is a risk factor for heart disease. And he took that initiative to get screened for heart disease. And he's otherwise healthy, exercises, but he knew that that was a risk factor that he had. So he went to his doctor, got screened for heart disease. And it turns out that during the course of testing, they did a stress test, which is where they walk on a treadmill, they monitor the heart rhythm and function. And it turns out that he had an abnormal stress test. And from that stress test, he had a procedure called an angiogram. And he found that he had a 90% blockage of a main artery. If he had not taken that initiative and realized that he has risk factors and went to his doctor to get screened, something different would have happened. So it's extremely important to advocate for your own health, get screened, find out what your risk factors are, and start taking necessary steps to decrease your risk for heart disease.
Thank you so much. It's so important to advocate for yourself. Dr. Brown?
Is it on now?
Yeah, there we go.
So just to piggyback, definitely know your numbers is something that we need to emphasize. And if you take away nothing else from today, just remember that simple phrase, know your numbers. The numbers you should be concerned about are, one, you know, your blood pressure. Everyone should know exactly what their blood pressure is. The other number you should be concerned about is your cholesterol, knowing what your cholesterol is, understanding, you know, the difference between a good cholesterol level and a bad cholesterol level. Another number you should be aware of, if you have diabetes, is your hemoglobin A1C. You need to make sure that your diabetes is well controlled. The other number you should be aware of is your weight. We've got to make sure that we take care of obesity. Obesity is a major problem in the African American community. Another thing that I like to emphasize is knowing the signs and symptoms of heart disease. And I'll give you a little story that's really close to me because it was one of my frat brothers. And I know how y'all can relate to how close you are with your fraternity brothers. But one of my fraternity brothers, and this was in 2013, so we're talking about 8 or 9 years ago. He was 44 years old at the time and began having a little bit of burning in his chest. Really didn't think much of it, thought it might be indigestion because he was a little bit overweight and wasn't really eating the way he should. But he kind of brought it to my attention and said, you know, I have this burning in my chest sometimes. And I said, well, you know, when does it occur? He says, well, sometimes it happens when I'm like working out or on the treadmill or going upstairs. And I said, well, I don't know if that's heartburn. I said, you know, we need to, you know, I think you really need to get this looked into. So we ended up doing a treadmill test on him. It came back mildly abnormal. But, you know, of course, I said, well, you know, with the symptoms, I think we really need to do a heart catheterization on you. And he said, you really think I need a heart cath and angiogram? I said, yeah, I'm really concerned because of the symptoms you're having. You're having the heartburn, even though it doesn't feel like chest pain, it's a heartburn that's happening when you exert yourself. And so this was on a Friday. I said, well, we'll do the heart cath on Monday. He said, now we still gonna tailgate at the Falcons game on Sunday, right? I said, of course, we're still gonna tailgate at the Falcons game on Sunday. So Sunday, we, you know, and in the back of my mind, I'm hoping nothing is wrong. But, you know, just kind of having the experience, you know, I am really concerned. But Sunday, the Falcons game, we kicked it, we barbecued, we, you know, had our Crown Royal and Coke, we, you know, did the whole thing. Monday, we ended up doing the heart catheterization. He had a 99% blockage in his LAD, which is the left anterior descending artery, which some people call the widowmaker. 99% blockage. That was probably one of the toughest procedures I've ever had to perform, not from a mechanical standpoint, just from an emotional standpoint, just knowing, you know, that, you know, at any moment while we were kicking it at the Falcons game, he could have died. He could have had a heart attack. So that kind of, you know, always sticks with me, and I always share that story to let people know you have to be aware of your body. If you feel something is not wrong, bring it to your doctor's attention. You know, if he would have never brought it to my attention that he had the heartburn type symptom, you know, who knows how he would have ended up. I mean, he could have died from a massive heart attack. So we'll talk a little bit more about this. We'll be, you know, definitely available to answer your questions, but definitely know your numbers and know the symptoms of heart disease.
Thank you so much, Dr. Brown. You know, knowing your numbers, but also some easy things, getting a blood pressure machine. I mean, you can go to your local CVS, Walgreens, and get a little blood pressure machine. Also, put the scale in the bathroom, so when you wake up, just hop on it and see what your weight is. But also, don't ignore the pressure in your chest, and just even knowing your body when things are just not right. Dr. Casey, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm not going to try to repeat anything that the other panelists have said, but, you know, educating yourself, knowing those numbers, going to websites that are reputable, you know. You want to go to, not just looking at stuff on Facebook or Instagram, or, you know, you want to go to acc.org. You want to go to the American Heart Association. Those types of websites to get your information. Thinking about advocating for our family members, I think we need to, you know, we're all in this room because obviously you guys care about your health. But you also need to be that voice in your ear of your family members, pushing them to go and seek medical care, going to seek screening. You need to push them to go to a doctor, you know. A lot of people put off going to a doctor until something's wrong. Well, you know, you don't have to wait that long. You know, a lot of us, like she was saying, one of the doctors were saying, have risk factors that we all know about. You know somebody who's died of a heart attack or had a stroke. You know somebody who had diabetes. You know somebody who has high blood pressure. When we think about risk factors, we think about all these factors that can lead up to you having an event. You know, having a heart attack, a lot of times it is generic, but 80% of the time it's due to things that we're doing in our life. Not exercising, cigarette smoke, diabetes, high blood pressure, All these things can be prevented before you have to see one of us, okay? So I think the most important thing is, right, going to see a doctor, getting your education, and if you have somebody in your family that you know is putting off that preventative maintenance, make sure they go and see somebody.
Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Casey.
Can I mention one thing
Yes,
about that?
Sure.
So, very important in terms of advocating for your loved ones. I would say the men in this room, your wives. You know, as women, we're so busy taking care of everybody, and we really don't spend that time taking care of ourselves. So you find your wives will push you to go to the doctor, push you to get screened, but they actually will not get screened. So you need to be advocates for your wives too and encourage them. Because a lot of women don't personalize heart disease. They think it's a man's disease. They think it's something that you have to worry about later. But, you know, later might be too late. So as you're advocating for yourselves, also advocate for your wives who might not take that step to go seek care because they're busy advocating and caring for everybody else. So that's something I just wanted to point out.
You know, Dr. Luby, you brought to my mind a story. My mom, she's a nurse, retired. She actually went to the hospital 3 times, emergency room, and said, hey, I have some back pain, and I think I have pressure on my chest. And they said, well, must be indigestion. Sent her away 3 times. The last time she went back and she said, you know what? I've seen people die. I think I'm dying. And it wasn't then that they found out that she had 3 blocked arteries. So, you know, it shows up in so many different ways. We're never going to do what's on television and come in with a heart attack like this, or Sanford and Son, where you know, be like this. We will feel the pain in so many different ways, and it's important that you don't ignore it. So one of the things I want to do is invite some of you, I think there's some mics right here up on the sides. If you have any questions, please step to the mic and we'll allow you to ask the physicians any questions. So please, I invite you to do that while I ask our physicians one more important question. You know, I'd love to know how the pandemic has changed healthcare and heart health in particular. Anyone want to jump in on it? Dr. Casey, you maybe want to start?
Well, I think during the pandemic, you know, my experience was that people were not coming to the doctor as much. They were delaying care. And as I said before, you know, you can do a lot of things that can prevent you from having to be on the cath lab table, you know, before that happens. But we were getting a lot of patients coming in, cardiogenic shock, meaning that their blood pressures are very low, they're hardly breathing, fluid is filling up in their lungs, all because they're having a heart attack. There's a blockage there, and now they have a 50% mortality, meaning that you flip a coin. No matter what I do, they could live, they could die, okay? So you know, all this is, you know, everyone's been saying prevention, but, you know, there are a lot of barriers in our lives, right? Just being African American, there are a lot of barriers socially. You know, there have been barriers throughout, you know, our history. The pandemic has been a barrier not only with what it does to us, but also what it did to our minds, because we didn't go out and seek that help. We were scared to go and see our physician or go and be around people because of the pandemic. So we've got to break through those barriers, other barriers that may be, you know, saying to, you know, in our minds saying that, hey, you know, I'm okay. I don't need to see a doctor. But you know, I think about my dad. You know, my dad had a stroke while I was getting my PhD. So I drove down to Opelousas, you know, where he was in the hospital there. You know, he could barely move. And, you know, I started thinking about my grandfather, who also had a stroke. And, you know, I used to, you know, he couldn't move afterwards. He couldn't move his legs. And I was looking at my dad, and I was talking to my brother about it, you know, after the stroke and, you know, his rehabilitation and everything. My dad really didn't want to do the rehabilitation, didn't want to take part in it, didn't want to push himself to do things. And we thought about it, it's because his dad, after his stroke, he saw him, he didn't do anything. He didn't take part in that rehabilitation. So he thinks his outcome is supposed to be like my grandfather, his dad's outcome. So I bring that up to just say that whatever has happened to other family members in your life, it doesn't have to be your outcome. And so we pushed our dad to take part in rehabilitation, do the things that he needs to do. And now, it's been 10 years later, he's walking around, he's doing great, seeing his 2-year-old grandchild and, living life. But those are those mental barriers that, we have to push through. So, the pandemic has hurt, as far as, we can talk about the number of people in the hospital. Sometimes we've had to shuffle things around, but don't let that prevent you from seeking health care.
Excellent. I see some folks who have questions from the floor. We'll start over here and then go to the next one over here. Is that mic on?
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Brother Warren Jones with Epsilon Kappa Kappa in Canton, Mississippi, and I'm a family physician. I would like to ask you to please address the need for each of the brothers to have a medical home, someone that knows them and provides their usual and customary care, that can aid them in doing the things you're talking about. And if I may, I'll share a personal story. My daughter died at 46 of congestive heart failure. The point that was made about having women to know about conditions is critically important. I advised her to see her doctors, but they did a shuffle. Yes. And when I finally got involved, it was too late. Okay? We've got to find a way to advocate for ourselves and advocate for the women in our lives as well. And I think the best way to do that is to have a medical home that can determine which of you excellent specialists to refer the patients to. And I'd love to hear your comments on it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that story.
Yes, very, very important point. When we talk about knowing your numbers, when you look at the panel of us, we're all specialists. We have a vascular surgeon here, but it does start with your primary care physician. When we, talk about diabetes, when we talk about high blood pressure, when we talk about cholesterol, I think, as your brother mentioned, having a home, having a primary care physician, making sure you're seeing your primary care physician on a regular basis is very, very important, because that's where a lot of things are actually picked up. That's where a lot of people come in and they say like, hey, my legs hurt when I walk. Is that arthritis? Well, no, sometimes it's peripheral vascular disease, which as we as cardiologists know that, when you talk about peripheral vascular disease, if people have blockages in their legs, they most certainly have blockages in their heart, because it's from atherosclerosis. It's a diffuse process that actually affects all the vessels in the body. So definitely making sure that you're seeing your regular doctor on a regular basis can actually make sure you're knowing your numbers and taking care of yourself.
Excellent. We have another question from the floor. Can that mic turn on?
Thank you. My name is Nathaniel Farley Jr., Theta Phi. Chi Chapter was my undergrad, spring '68.
Wow.
I am 75 years old. This phone, I check my wife's pressure and her blood pressure and pulse every morning, around 6:30 every morning. I do it for myself as well. I've been doing that for the last 4-5 years. August, we'll be married for 50 years. So God has provided that for us. But when I look at what I've done as a coach, I tell my kids when I was coaching, take care of your body will take care of you.
That's right.
So at one point, I stopped saying that. I was just telling them. So I had to start doing it myself.
That's right.
So now I work out, 3 days a week, trying to get it together. I'm losing this weight now, so I'm trying to do what's right. So my question is, if you don't take care of your body, how can you take care of anybody else?
That's right.
See, if it's like you trying to tell somebody what to do, and you're not doing it. So your words are really not anything, because you're not following what you're teaching and telling people. So how can you do that? If you're not a coach, then you can't tell anybody, because you're not used to telling people nothing. But if you're trying to stand alone and don't do what you need to do, then how can you take care of anybody else?
Yes, yes.
That's my statement, not a question.
And thank you so much, because it's so important that we have to take care of ourselves before we can take care of others. I'm going to go over here.
Thank you, Marvin Broadwater from Columbus, Georgia, and I'm a former flight paramedic. But I had a heart attack in 2001, and what was phenomenal, and this my question's for Dr. Casey, but what was phenomenal to me is that the cardiologist said, well, Mr. Broadwater, you had what's called a small heart attack. To me, when you can't get air, there's no such thing as a small heart attack. But what was significant about this week, GMA had a story on about minorities not getting health care. They have a new term for it now. Doctors won't actually, used to be years ago, doctors would go ahead and refer you to the specialist. Now, they're finding that for minorities, they won't do that. So my question to Dr. Casey is, for those that have had some cardiovascular episodes, what is the schedule that you would suggest? I know a physical in the military, for flight folks, we had a physical every single year, and everything had to get checked. But when I'm finding out after I retired, that in the civilian world, it's not common for us to get a full checkup every single year. We don't do preventive maintenance on our bodies. We just wait until something hurts. Then we go to the doctor. So I'm asking, what is for someone that have those high risk factors? What's the schedule for going and getting a EKG as well as a treadmill test and all those things? Thank you.
That's a good question. And I will definitely say it depends on the patient, it depends on the person. But I can tell you, typically, how we look at it in cardiology, we look at primary prevention and secondary prevention. Primary prevention is basically somebody who has not had any issues, never had a diagnosed coronary artery disease, and we try to get them from having that. In your case, or somebody like yourself who's had coronary disease, that's more of a secondary issue. And now we're trying to prevent you from having another event. And so what I typically do, my patients, once again, kind of risk factors, controlling blood pressure, controlling their cholesterol. We have really good medications now that really can drive down that cholesterol number very far. When these medications first came out, they thought we were going to go out of business, and those are statins. And I don't know how many patients, I treat a lot of African Americans in my practice, and I don't know how many people that I treat that come to me and they're scared to take statins. They're scared to take these medications. And I always tell them, hey, if you're, people talk about, they hear about the joints hurting, the muscles hurting and everything. If that happens, we just stop the medication. It's going to go away. It's going to be fine. But they are scared to take these things. And that one medication came by and must have driven down our practice of having heart attacks and treating heart attacks tremendously. So if you're not seeing a cardiologist regularly after you have had, you definitely need to Google us, Google somebody. see them so that they can drive down that cholesterol, get your blood pressure 130/80 or less, make sure, you see somebody about your diabetes, if you have it, all those things. So definitely get to see somebody.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, and I'm getting the hook. So we are at time, so we're not able to field any more questions, but what I would mention to you is that if you have some time and want to talk to our physicians, please do so after we break. I can take a couple more? Okay, all right. All right, well, this is what I'm going to do, too. I'm going to ask Dr. Olabi and Dr. Alabi to take the next two questions, if they can. So we're going to go over here. Oh, wait, I went over here, so we're going over here.
Yeah, good morning. Brian Blair, Spring 2001, Mighty Omicron Epsilon chapter, currently with Omicron. Over the last 3 years, I've experienced 2 episodes of atrial fibrillation, where, I would like to let the brothers know, these devices, Apple Watches and stuff like this, it was the only reason I went to the hospital. My watch told me to go to the hospital. So in speaking of atrial fibrillation, post or now, and after going through an ablation as well, what would you suggest the next moves be?
So for people that don't know what atrial fibrillation is, it's an abnormality in the heart's electrical activity. So normally when your heart beats, it beats in sync and it's very regular. But in atrial fibrillation, it's an abnormality where your heart is no longer beating in sync, but it's very irregular. And not only is it irregular, it beats extremely fast. Your heart is supposed to beat between 60 and 100 beats a minute. But with atrial fibrillation, your heart's beating over 100 beats a minute. And can you imagine what happens when your heart is just beating as if you're running all the time? It can eventually wear out the heart, and it can lead to conditions like congestive heart failure. And aside from that fast heart rate, there's also the risk that because the blood flow is no longer smooth and regular, there's a chance that you can form a clot. And if this clot gets pumped to the brain, it can cause a stroke. So I think, as you mentioned, one of the greatest innovations we have now is this artificial intelligence, machine learning. So you having that Apple Watch was extremely important, and it probably saved your life, because had you not known about your AFib, your first presentation that you might have had would have been coming in with a stroke. Yes. So definitely these devices are very helpful. And the procedure that you had, which is the ablation, it helps with AFib. But now you have to look at what your risk factors for the AFib were in the first place. We found that things like lifestyle, diet, weight, all these things can predispose you to atrial fibrillation. So what you need to look at is, how did I get AFib in the first place? Was it a family history? Do I have a condition called sleep apnea, where at night I'm sleeping and I stop breathing? That can predispose me to atrial fibrillation. Do I have thyroid problems? Am I overweight? Am I not eating the right diet? So all these things that predispose you to AFib in the first place, you have to continue to address those things. So we know that there's a correlation between weight and atrial fibrillation, so we usually encourage people to try to lose weight. We also look for other things that can cause it. If you have sleep apnea, we try to make sure that you are using your CPAP machine to sleep at night, so that's going to be very, very important. And also making sure that you're staying hydrated, checking for things like, for example, when you exercise and you sweat a lot, you might lose your electrolytes like your potassium, magnesium. And when these things go down, it can increase your risk for atrial fibrillation as well. So it's really just looking at, how did I get AFib in the first place, and how can I prevent that from happening again by addressing those risk factors that cause the atrial fibrillation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dr. Alabi?
I wanted to mention 2 things. He brought up technology, and so did the young man who's been checking his wife of 50 years' blood pressure. So I do the same thing for my father. I live in Atlanta, Georgia. My father lives in Lincoln, Nebraska. But every morning I check his blood pressure and his weight by an app on my phone. And for someone, my father, who before we started kind of, leveraging technology in such a way so that we could help him better, particularly me remotely, he was in the hospital, say, once every 3 to 4 months. And now, as of July, coming up, he hasn't been in the hospital since July. So we've been able to kind of titrate medications or make changes, or I see something wrong, I call his nurse practitioner at his heart hospital so that we can make those changes, quickly and reduce his risk of having to be readmitted to the hospital. So technology can save lives, and it can also reduce your risk of having to go back to the hospital. I also wanted to make a comment about the medical home. So there really is nothing more important, or few things more important than a medical home. There's some data that I've been kind of looking at over the last several months that I'll be presenting at a conference later this month. In particular, we were looking at veterans in particular over the last 10 years who have unfortunately had to have a major amputation, so a lower extremity amputation. And we looked at those individuals to see how aggressive their care was, meaning how hard did somebody fight to try to keep their legs. And we found that the #1 risk factor associated with the aggressiveness of care, meaning how aggressively you got that care, was having a primary care doctor and seeing them or a medical specialist like a cardiologist, endocrinologist, seeing them at least in total more than 3 times a year.
Excellent. We're going to take these last 3 questions. You can go over here.
Yes, thank you, Stephen Wilson, Meridian, Mississippi. I have a question about when you feel like something is wrong and you're not being addressed in the manner that you think you should be, and you have to keep pushing. How do you keep from becoming a troubled patient? And are there any advocacy groups that we can report or go to say that, hey, I think something's wrong, but I need to go further? And my second question is, do we always have to go through a primary care physician to get to see somebody like you if we think we need more eyes on our situation? Thank
What
you.
a great question about the unconscious bias and the microaggressions that exist in healthcare. Who would like to take it?
So, right. So unconscious bias and microaggressions, they're real. They're real outside of medicine, they're real in medicine. And they can definitely impact your care in many ways. In people being short-sighted about the symptoms that you're discussing, people being short-sighted or maybe even neglectful about the imaging tests or different studies that they do or don't get for you, and even the treatments that they do or don't offer you. I am a huge advocate, both as a patient, as a family member of a patient, and as a physician, of a second opinion. There's nothing wrong with getting a second opinion. I even tell people if they come see me, you don't like what I'm saying? See somebody else. I'm okay with that. You're probably not going to find somebody that's going to do something better, but you can see somebody else. That's fine.
Dr. Alabi, tell them.
But it is very important. #1. So I should mention this about that. It ties into the medical home. You have to be in a medical home with someone that you trust, right? Sometimes that's not the first primary care physician that you meet, and that's real. Sometimes that's not the first cardiologist or the first vascular surgeon that you meet. You have to be getting your care from somebody that you trust, and from care for your family members from somebody that you and your family trust. That's very important. It's hard to say when you walk into a physician's office and you don't trust them, it's hard to say, oh, they told me to take this statin medication. Do you really think they're going to take it if they don't trust them? Probably not, Do you really think they're going to believe them when they say, most people that take statins don't actually get this muscle pain that, people talk about? Probably not going to believe that, even though it's true. So it is very important that you find someone that you can trust and continue care with that person. Doesn't mean that you need to shop around for like a year or 2 years, but you need to find somebody that you can trust.
Excellent. These last 2 questions?
Yes, Michael Bowie, initiated a Pi chapter in '85 and with Beta Pi chapter in Gainesville, Florida. I just wanted to make a comment and then go to the question. When I'm the advisor to Omicron Zeta chapter. In 2010, one of the undergraduate brothers passed away from a heart condition. He had the symptoms of what most people would have thought was heartburn, as we heard a little bit earlier today, but he passed away that evening. I think we need to stress also, because we talked about spouses, but children, people who may even look fit, can die or suffer or pass away from these conditions. So if you can talk a little bit more about that, I think that would be extremely important, because as young brothers, oftentimes they don't have a primary physician. We all know when you're on campus and you're in college, you don't go see one on a regular basis. So that's something that's extremely important, and we're seeing a lot more of that today.
Yeah, in my limited, and I've probably been out of practice about 4 years now. And I wasn't expecting to see putting stents or sending people to bypass that were like in their 20s. I was not expecting to see that. I remember this one case, this guy came in, 25, brother, came in, looked very fit, and did a coronary angiogram, multi-vessel, all of his vessels were blocked, okay? Got a cholesterol level on him, as we typically do. His total cholesterol was 500. And so yeah, you have to, it almost seems like every couple of months, I'm seeing somebody in their 30s coming in with a heart attack. One of my good family friend went and that goes back to that other question the guy had about being an advocate. So he had a stent placed by another interventionalist. He had a blockage that was still there. The interventionalist said, "Oh, there's nothing I can do about that blockage." He came and saw the friend called, knew his wife, called my wife, called me. I was like, "Hey, can you see?" I was like, "Sure." Saw him. I was like, "Dude, yeah, we can take care of this." So you have to advocate for yourself. You can't stop at the first person to say, "Oh, this can't be done, that can't be done." You have to, if you think there's something that can be done or something's not right, you have to seek that second opinion, right? I think, in going back to the stat that she was mentioning, not being able to open up to your doctor, not being able to talk to them, pushing medications down you. I have many people that I see, and we just have conversation about things, and a lot of them tell me, "No, Doc, I don't want to do it." I'm like, "Hey, that's my recommendation. I think from the data that I know about it, that I think this is the right thing. But I appreciate and I respect your position. Let's talk about this on a second visit, or let's talk about this a lot more the next time I see you." And a lot of times that they end up opening up and talking about things. Another thing, just to be quick, the microaggression thing, I just wanted to hit that on that because I think that's really important. There's a patient I'm seeing now in the hospital. She came in, she was very, I just don't want anything done, I just don't want anything. Come to find out, after talking to her a little bit, her niece just got killed by a family member. And, and she ended up just opening up to me about that. Now, if I had just put her off as just being this, aggressive, black woman that didn't want to be, I would have never known, and, she would never have opened up about that whole thing. So I think, all that being said, yeah, microaggressions are a true thing, but you have to search for that physician that's going to at least say, "Hey, there's something else going on here. There's something there, it's not just non-compliance, it's not something else. This person is a person, let's see what's going on."
And this is the last question, because I am officially getting the hook, and I'll ask you, Doc, to go ahead and comment on that.
Good morning. Is it time for me to talk?
Yeah.
I'll just check it. I want to make sure everything's okay. My name is Woods. Y'all probably heard a lot about Woods in the last couple of days about the tiger. But anyway, I'm from Tupelo, Mississippi. Spring 1977 is when I pledged at Ada Xi chapter, and currently I'm a member of Zeta Chi chapter in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. My question is, I've recently just lost 120 pounds.
Oh, wow.
I was 341. Today I'm happy to report I'm 219. Okay, but anyway, my question is, what about cramps? Like, you person have cramps in their hands, cramps in their legs, and stuff like that. Is that also related to heart disease?
Great question. And Dr. Ulubi, do you want to comment on the last one, and then someone else answer this question on cramps?
The comment I wanted to make about the last question is, he mentioned the fact that the symptoms that were presented was heartburn. I think it's very important that we realize that heart disease symptoms are not always just classic, you go on TV, you see crushing chest pain. That's not the only symptom for heart attacks. About 1/3 of people will have very unique symptoms that might present differently. It might be just dizziness, it could be shortness of breath, it could be indigestion-like symptoms, it could be pain in the back like your mom had, and not recognizing that that had anything to do with the heart. It could be left arm pain, it could be jaw pain. I had a patient of mine who was having toothache. She was having a toothache, and she was traveling to Florida, and she said, you know what, when I get back to Georgia, I'm going to see my dentist because I'm having this toothache. But she never did make it back to Georgia. She ended up in the hospital with a heart attack from a toothache. So I think it's important that we recognize that the symptoms of heart disease or heart attacks is not always chest pain. So that's one thing I wanted to point out. So it's extremely important that we understand that there are other unique factors, and know your body. If you know something's not right, definitely seek care.
Excellent.
And I'll just say quickly, cramps in your legs, cramps in your arms, might be arterial disease, might not. You should just see a vascular surgeon.
Excellent. I love the plug. So thank you so much for the amazing questions and the dialogue from our distinguished panel. One of the last things I want you to do is do a call to action. So I want you to take out your phones one more time. There's going to be a QR code with last 2 surveys. Are you more likely to take action on heart health for yourself and your family after this presentation? We want to know. And are you more likely to take action on your vascular health for yourself and your family after this presentation? I want to say a big thank you. Thank you so much to the Grand Basilisk, Dr. David Marion. I want to say thank you to the 7th District Representative, Regional Harris. I want to say thank you to Dr. Kevin Pruitt, for who really grasped on to the vision that we had within Close the Gap. Our amazing panelists of physicians, please give them a round of applause, please. I want to thank you so much for joining this session. And one of the things I want to say is thank you to the men of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated for recognizing how important this is to our community, and most importantly, taking action. Thank you so much.
Round of applause again for Black Health Matters, Boston Scientific. Thank you for a fine job, Camille, and the physicians here. Brothers, you got a lot of information here today. Don't worry about it. We're going to send a summary of this session to you when you get back to your respective chapters so that you can process this information and you can make sure that we follow up on what we said we were going to do. Take-home points is preventative care. Obviously, we all have the family stories. I had a great aunt who died of congestive heart failure. She went to the doctor, they gave her hydrochlorothiazide, that's just a basic water pill. It cost less than $1. She refused to take it and died of congestive heart failure from fluid overload. And she was a Southern lady from Mississippi, and she said, my ankle's swollen, and we all know what that means. So, and the last thing is community service. So I want to thank real quick, if I can get Dr. Reed, this is my medical committee here in the 7th District. Dr. Reed, out of Mississippi. If he's here, he can stand. Give him a round of applause. I have Dr. Brown out of Alabama. I don't think he's here. Brother Folks from Georgia, please stand. And from Florida, we have Dr. Hines. I don't think he made it either. But what we're doing here in the 7th District is the last important point that they brought home was community. And so me and the DR, we sat down, we want boots on the ground. We're getting the preventative care out in the community. You take care of yourself, you take care of your family, but we're going to take care of the community, and that's what we do as Omega Men, is community service. And so we will continue to bring you programs like that, like this, and we will continue to do things in the community to make sure that we survive as Black people. Thank you, Brother DR. That's it. Thank you. Thank you for coming.